Have you ever wondered when an avoidant person is truly starting to fall in love? It usually isn't the moment they say the words, "I love you." It's not necessarily when they bring you gifts or plan a romantic date. The deeper sign appears when they begin choosing vulnerability instead of control. For someone whose instinct is to protect themselves and run from emotional exposure, that choice can change everything. Avoidant people often aren't distant because of something you did. Their behavior is usually connected to an old internal survival system built around avoiding pain. Their emotional world can feel like a heavily guarded fortress. Independence becomes protection. Space feels necessary. Control gives them a sense of safety. Somewhere in their past, through inconsistency, neglect, rejection, or abandonment, many learned a painful lesson. Getting close to someone can lead to getting hurt. That's why they may initially seem confident, relaxed, charming, and completely independent. But beneath that exterior, there can be a powerful fear of needing another person. Vulnerability challenges the entire system they've built. Allowing someone inside can feel like opening a door they promised themselves would remain closed forever. Then something unexpected happens. Love slowly begins changing the rules. It doesn't always arrive dramatically. Sometimes, one day, they tell you something personal about their past. Maybe they casually say, "I don't usually talk about this, but when I was younger." To you, it may sound like a small conversation. But for them, it can be a huge step. They're allowing you near a part of themselves they've spent years protecting. What matters isn't always how much they reveal. It's how difficult it was for them to reveal it at all. Real vulnerability isn't simply saying everything. It's allowing yourself to be seen. For an avoidant person, that can feel terrifying. When they show you their doubts, flaws, fears, or emotional confusion, they're placing something delicate in your hands and hoping you won't use it against them. That's love finding a way through years of emotional protection. The most powerful part is that they may not even fully understand why they're changing. Avoidant people often try to analyze emotions instead of simply experiencing them. They think their way through love. But when they start breaking their own emotional rules, staying close when they normally pull away, something deeper is happening. Their feelings are becoming stronger than their old defense mechanisms. And don't expect this transformation to look like a movie scene. Sometimes it's a quiet conversation in the car. Sometimes it's a late-night message saying they remembered something you told them. Sometimes it's simply sitting beside you during an uncomfortable emotional moment. And instead of leaving, they remain there. That matters. An avoidant doesn't always become vulnerable because vulnerability suddenly feels comfortable. Sometimes they do it because the connection has become more important than the instinct to hide. So when you witness that moment, don't immediately dissect it or demand more from it. Just recognize it. What you're seeing may be a deeply unconscious decision to trust again, perhaps after years of refusing to do so. When an avoidant chooses openness over control, it isn't just a sweet gesture, it's an internal revolution. They're not only allowing you to see them, they're allowing themselves to step out from behind the walls they've lived inside. That's love in one of its most honest forms. Don't only pay attention to how they express love, pay attention to what they have to overcome in order to express it. And there's another important shift. Avoidant people generally don't chase connection in the way others might. Their instinct is often to withdraw, detach, and create distance when emotions become intense. It doesn't necessarily mean they don't care. Sometimes closeness itself disrupts their sense of emotional balance. When they feel too exposed or dependent, stepping back helps them feel in control again. That's why consistent initiation means something. When a person with avoidant tendencies begins reaching out first, calling you back, making plans, checking in, or returning after a difficult conversation, it may represent a real change. Reaching towards someone requires them to enter emotional territory they would normally avoid. Without directly saying it, they may be showing you that connection has started to matter more than distance. Inside many avoidant people, there can be two opposing voices. One says, "Be careful, don't get too close, protect yourself." The other quietly says, "Stay, let this person matter, don't run." When that second voice becomes stronger, their behavior begins to shift. Not necessarily through dramatic declarations, but through small and repeated choices to move closer when their instincts tell them to retreat. That isn't weakness, that's emotional growth. Think about what this requires from someone whose nervous system has learned to associate intimacy with danger. Sending the first message, returning a call, initiating time together, or following up after conflict can be more than ordinary affection. It can be their emotional system learning that love doesn't always have to mean losing themselves. Sometimes your consistency and emotional presence create enough safety that silence no longer feels better than connection. The person who once found comfort in disappearing begins realizing that being away from you doesn't bring the same relief anymore. Slowly, they start moving toward the very closeness they once avoided. But it's important not to confuse inconsistent breadcrumbs with genuine investment. There is a difference between someone reaching out to regain control and someone reaching out because they sincerely want to build a relationship. The difference often appears in consistency. Genuine connection isn't only about getting a reaction, it's about maintaining the bond. When an avoidant person truly begins to care deeply, distance can stop feeling like protection and start feeling painful. That's when emotional survival begins turning into emotional courage. They may not suddenly become completely secure, but staying connected becomes important enough for them to challenge their old patterns. When someone who once disappeared begins deliberately choosing presence, you're witnessing something meaningful. Love doesn't always arrive with dramatic gestures. Sometimes it's a simple message in the middle of the day. "I was thinking about you." Don't just focus on the words. Notice the courage behind the action. And one of the signs people often overlook is when they stop running from your emotions and begin trying to understand them. Avoidant people aren't necessarily without emotional depth. Often emotional intensity simply hasn't felt safe to them. Their own feelings can be overwhelming, and someone else's pain or vulnerability may trigger a sense of pressure. When you express needs, hurt, or emotion, their nervous system may interpret it as a responsibility they're afraid they won't know how to handle. So their instinct may be to pull back, shut down, or emotionally disconnect. But when they begin staying present and trying to understand what you're feeling instead of immediately escaping it, that can be another quiet sign that something inside them is changing. When emotions become too intense, an avoidant person may suddenly change the subject, go quiet, become distant, or even respond with sarcasm. That doesn't always mean they don't care. Sometimes it means they care, but the emotional intensity feels overwhelming. There are too many feelings, too much uncertainty, and too much exposure happening at once. So their instinct tells them to escape. That's the pattern they've learned to rely on. But when love begins to grow, something slowly starts to change. It may begin with something incredibly small. Instead of immediately shutting down the conversation, they stay with it for a few more seconds. Instead of changing the subject, they ask, "What do you mean?" After you share something painful, they might pause and genuinely ask you to explain what that experience felt like for you. For someone who normally avoids emotional intensity, that isn't necessarily automatic. It's a conscious choice happening in real time. They're resisting the urge to retreat and stepping into emotional territory they once avoided completely. And often, they're not doing it to manipulate you or get something from you. Love has simply given them a different reason to stay. Understanding your experience is beginning to matter more than immediately protecting themselves from discomfort. That's what genuine intimacy can do. When an avoidant person starts falling deeply for someone, They can slowly become more curious about that person's emotional world. They listen with more patience. Their questions become more thoughtful. They may not always know how to solve the problem, and eventually they may realize they don't need to. Sometimes they simply want to understand what is happening inside you. Not because emotional conversations suddenly feel easy for them, but because you have become more important than the discomfort those conversations create. And that's something people often fail to recognize. When someone walks into an emotional space they don't fully understand, doesn't know how to fix, and would normally escape from, but chooses to stay, that is more than basic empathy. That's love showing itself through action. It's easy to be close to someone when everything feels light and effortless. The deeper test comes when that person is hurt, angry, scared, or emotionally exposed. Staying engaged during those moments requires a different kind of commitment. For someone with strong avoidant patterns, remaining emotionally present during intense feelings can feel incredibly difficult. Yet sometimes they stay anyway. That's where the real transformation happens. Not necessarily in the big romantic speeches or perfect weekends, but in the quiet moments when they don't disappear. They may be uncomfortable. They may not know what to say. They may even feel afraid, but they're still there. Because loving you means wanting to understand you. And understanding you means learning to face the emotional parts of connection they once worked hard to avoid. So if you see this happening, honor the process. Don't rush them or punish them because they aren't perfect at it. Notice the effort. Someone with a long history of emotional avoidance, who is learning how to be present, is choosing connection over what feels familiar and comfortable. They're stretching their emotional capacity because the relationship has become meaningful enough to grow for. Don't dismiss those small moments. When they stop escaping and begin listening, you're witnessing a guarded heart learning how to remain open. When they no longer run from your emotions and start learning how to sit with them, they're not just experiencing love, they're changing through it. And this next part is where many people misunderstand avoidant behavior completely. When an avoidant person begins missing you during your absence, that isn't automatically neediness, weakness, or unhealthy dependence. Sometimes it's something much deeper. It's the gradual collapse of a belief they've built their identity around, the belief that they don't truly need anyone. Self-sufficiency can become an important part of how avoidant people see themselves. Being independent, unaffected, and emotionally untouchable can feel like proof that they're safe. For a while, that emotional distance may seem to work. It creates control and predictability, even when it also creates loneliness. Then love enters the picture and interrupts that system. Especially when they're connected to someone who doesn't constantly chase them, demand reassurance, or try to force closeness. When you step back and allow space, they finally have room to experience their own feelings without distraction. And sometimes that silence reveals something they weren't expecting. Instead of relief, they feel restless. Instead of feeling completely free, they begin wondering about you. The distance they expected to bring comfort creates uncertainty instead. That's the paradox. When there is no meaningful attachment, distance may genuinely feel peaceful. But when real feelings have developed, distance can become a mirror. It forces them to recognize that they aren't as detached as they once believed. Memories of you start appearing unexpectedly. They wonder what you're doing, who you're spending time with, or whether you've moved forward without them. Not necessarily because they want to control you, but because a connection has formed that they can't simply explain away with logic. Missing you becomes proof that something inside them has changed. For someone who has learned to avoid attachment, longing can feel frightening because longing means emotional exposure. It means another person has become significant enough to affect them. Your absence isn't only a thought, it can become a physical feeling of restlessness, tension, or a quiet awareness that you matter more than they ever planned to admit. This isn't necessarily obsession. Sometimes it's an awakening, and they may not respond to those feelings immediately. Some avoidant people can spend a long time trying to reason themselves out of what they feel. They may attempt to put their emotions back into a neat box and regain the control they once had. But if your absence affects them more than they expected, something important has shifted. Their emotional system is no longer automatically rejecting connection. Part of them is beginning to want it. When you become the person they think about in quiet moments, when your presence starts carrying emotional meaning, you're no longer simply someone who passed through their life. You've become part of a new understanding of what connection can feel like. You don't have to chase that realization. Sometimes silence is where a person finally meets the feelings they've spent years avoiding. Missing someone doesn't make them weak, it makes them human. And when they allow themselves to feel that absence rather than immediately numbing it, escaping it, or replacing the connection, they may finally begin understanding what that bond meant to them. That's when the fear can start changing. They may no longer be running from the discomfort of getting close. Instead, they begin confronting the possibility of losing something meaningful. And there's another powerful sign to watch for. They begin lowering their guard and allowing you to see pieces of their inner world. For an avoidant person, vulnerability can feel deeply unnatural. Much of their emotional structure has been built around protection, from rejection, disappointment, dependence, and the possibility of being hurt by someone they trusted. So they create boundaries and emotional walls designed to keep others at a safe distance. Not because they're heartless, but because closeness may have once felt unpredictable. And when closeness feels unpredictable, it can feel dangerous. So they hide certain parts of themselves. They compartmentalize. They keep conversations light, make jokes when things become too personal, and protect their deepest thoughts behind emotional walls. But love can slowly soften that armor. Not through pressure, not through begging, but through steady presence, consistency, and the quiet feeling that someone is there without demanding that they become someone else. The opening may be small. It might not be a dramatic confession. It could be a simple sentence in the middle of an ordinary conversation. "I've never really told anyone this," or "that reminds me of something I went through." Pay attention to those moments. They aren't always casual stories. Sometimes they're signals that trust is beginning to grow. They're loosening their grip, even slightly, and allowing you closer to the world they usually keep hidden. For someone with avoidant patterns, that can be an enormous step. Avoidance isn't always about feeling nothing. Sometimes it's about feeling deeply and not knowing where to place those feelings. Many have spent years editing themselves, hiding their truth, and convincing everyone, including themselves, that everything is fine. So when they let you see even a small part of what is real inside them, that's not an accident. It's intimacy. And often, they're watching what happens next. Not necessarily consciously, but emotionally. Do you listen without judging? Do you treat what they shared with care? Do you allow them to be open without immediately demanding more? Because vulnerability isn't about revealing everything at once. It's about revealing something real and discovering whether it's safe to continue. When an avoidant person is falling in love, they often begin with one small truth. And when that truth is received with patience and empathy, rather than pressure or control, another door can slowly begin to open. Never underestimate what it means for someone who has spent years making themselves emotionally invisible to finally allow another person to truly see them. If they begin sharing their fears, their past relationships, or dreams they've never felt comfortable saying out loud, they're showing you something far more valuable than a perfect romantic gesture. They're showing you that, little by little, they are beginning to trust you with the person they really are.